Okay, welcome back. This is week 2 in Appendix A. I decided to not do the chapters in the right order, so we did chapter 1, and now we're switching all the way to the back of the book to do Appendix A, which is all about how to use Microsoft Project. When we're done with that, then we're going to go back to chapter 2, 3, 4, and do all the rest of them in order. Okay, so if you go to Appendix A, it's the guide to using Microsoft Project 2013. Now, most likely, you've followed instructions and you've installed the 2016 version of Microsoft Project, which is perfectly fine. I will tell you that there are some differences. I mean, all of the functionality that they talk about in Appendix A does exist in the 2016 version. However, it might not be exactly the place where they tell you it's going to be. And so I'm going to point those things out as we go along. So you kind of sort of need to pay attention, particularly to the point where I say, this is not what it says in the appendix, or this is not what it has in 2013. Cool? All right. So, while we're waiting, I'm just going to go ahead and launch Microsoft Project. Okay. So, you've installed it, and so is it going to be under M for Microsoft or P for Project? P for Project. Hey, I'm going to do something weird. Since I'm going to be using this a lot, I'm going to go ahead and just drag and drop this guy off to, I'm just going to hold the control key down and go, doot. Whoop, try that again. And just copy this thing to the desktop. That way I can just launch it like normal. Okay, ta-da! Now I've got Microsoft Project up and running. Cool. All right. So, skipping the first couple of pages in the appendix because it reads more like an advertisement, getting to page 6 in the appendix, it talks about how this is better than a collection of unrelated tools. In other words, you could do this. You could do this and have a Microsoft Access database full of all your cost, your data for your employees, plus an Excel spreadsheet for your cost. And you could kind of do it all together, but quite frankly, having it all together in one location actually makes it mo better. So they talk about the features of Microsoft Project. And so I'm just going to go down the list. It talks about creating work breakdown structures. We're going to get back to that term. Gantt charts, network diagrams, integrating scope, time, and cost data. Remember we talked about that, how there's, the 3 different points of the triangle. Setting a baseline and tracking your progress. This is a very cool tool because you could say, I anticipated that it was going to take 6 weeks to do this, but it now looks like it's going to take 7. So you can, set your goal, your baseline, and then you can track your progress against that. Providing other advanced project management features, talking about scheduling dependencies. In other words, you can figure out that this task has to occur before that one, that kind of thing. Critical path, which is kind of sort of the same thing. The critical path is those sets of tasks that are super critical and that a delay in any one of them will extend the timeline. Resource leveling. If you work in teams, you may find a scenario where you have one team that doesn't have enough work and another team that has too much work, and you can resource level. Okay, cool. Okay, so turn to page 7 now. It talks about using project. Well, there's some fundamental concepts here on this page which you probably need to take a minute or 2 to get around. One is this thing called the work breakdown structure. Work breakdown structure is basically a task. That's it, okay? Now, you can go a little crazy with tasks. I'm using a construction analogy once again. Let's say that you're building a new house, and you could have a task that said, put up sheetrock in the bathroom. And another task that said, put up sheetrock in the study. And put up sheetrock in the kitchen. You could. But quite frankly, that's the same skills, the same people, the same thing. It's just occurring in 3 different locations in the job site. So most people would not break it down to that level. They would say, hang sheetrock. And that meant that's the task for the entire house. It might take 4 days to do, but it's okay. There's no need to break it down into individual chunks. So there's kind of an art form in figuring out how far a WBS ought to go. Now, I would not combine tasks that require different skills. For example, I would not say hang sheetrock, run electrical cables, because most likely the guy running the sheetrock is not going to be a licensed electrician. So those I would have as separate work breakdown structure. So work breakdown structure, in essence, is basically a listing of tasks, listing of things that need to be done. That's it. There's nothing magical about this. And once you've done it a couple times, it'll all just kind of make sense. So just hang in there. Okay. Then you have to link tasks. So if you list all the tasks that has to happen, let's say, for example, one of the tasks is installing electrical wires, and the other task is doing hanging sheetrock. What order should I do that in? Should I put the sheetrock up first and then run the electrical lines? No, that would be kind of dumb. You need to run the electrical lines first because they go inside the walls. And then you put the sheetrock up. You don't paint the walls before the sheetrock is up. So electrical, sheetrock, tape and float, texture, paint, these are all things that have to happen in a particular order. Okay, so in Microsoft Project, you can link those tasks together so that the end of one is the starting point of the next one. And if this one scoots over a little bit or goes down a little bit, the rest of the schedule kind of moves with it. That's what linking is all about. Duration estimates. When you put one of these things together, you're supposed to come up and say, here's what I expect it to take. I expect it to take 4 days to do this. And hopefully you got some experience behind this. You're not just making these numbers up. But the point is, you're going to go in there and say 2 days or 4 hours or 2 weeks or something. And each one of these tasks is going to have an expected duration. And then, of course, you're going to be able to track to see whether or not you met that duration or not. Then assigning resources. You could go down to an individual. You could say, Bob is going to do this. He's going to be attached to these tasks. Most people don't do it that way. They do it by teams. So they'll say, like, the electrical team, I need 72 hours of electrical labor for this construction job. Okay, and not by name, but just electrical skill. Okay. So those are those fundamental concepts. So during this presentation and in the appendix, we're actually going to create a project, a fictitious project called Project A+. Hey, that's what it says. And to do that, you need to be able to extract the student data files from the supplemental materials part of Canvas. So if you haven't done that now would be a good time to put the video on pause and go back to Canvas, pull down that zip file, extract those files because we're going to need them. Okay, so assuming you've done that, on page 9, getting started. So when you first open Project, it comes up with a bunch of templates. It's like, look at all this stuff we got. A lot of weird stuff. From an Excel spreadsheet, from all these things. They got some really cool ones for software development, Agile, and things that we're going to be talking about a little later. Here's a commercial construction site, things of that nature. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically skip that. Here's one of those scenarios where things are slightly different than the older version. The older version had basically one of these templates that had get started. And we don't have one that says get started. So what we have to do is something slightly different. So hopefully you guys are paying attention. So I'm going to just click on a blank project. And I'm going to ignore the project for the time being because that's not what we're doing here. We're trying to get to that getting started thing. I'm going to go to reports, getting started, and then get start with project. Okay, so now we're essentially back to what it has in the Appendix A. So welcome to project. Take your projects to the next level in 3 easy steps, although the Appendix A says 4. So I'm just going to go through this little thing. So, add tasks. So get organized. So what you're supposed to be doing is adding tasks. Come up here and say, here's a task number 1. It's going to take 3 days, and here's when it's going to start. So you add dates. This allows you to measure your progress. Here's the actual task, the remaining task, and what you originally came up with. Manage dependencies. I can have this task related to that task. Okay, cool. So that's all. In fact, I think I can, hang on, I can zoom up. Yeah, look, I'm going to zoom up a lot so I can see all these pieces at once. You might not be able to read it, but I can see it. Okay, that's good. So here's the organizing tasks things. I'm going to hit next. So the next thing you talk about is creating reports. And they have some really cool reports you can come down. They have, a task burn down. In other words, I budgeted so many hours or so many dollars to a particular project, and how fast am I burning through those resources? And then work status, actual and remaining, and all the rest of that thing. The next thing you talk about is sharing this stuff with your team. Yes, you can put this on SharePoint. You can make PowerPoint slide presentations. There's even a server version of Microsoft Project that allows you to have all sorts of cool stuff. So basically, that's just kind of a cool little rundown of the major things that you have to do. Okay, so let's get back. So I'm going to go back to this view. So right now I'm in kind of a, I don't know, sort of like an introduction view. And I want to get back to just a plain old view. So right here it says Gantt chart. So I'm just going to click on that. Finally. Whew. Okay, so now we're back to normal. I'm going to click on the task view because that's kind of the normal way you start. Okay, we were in the report tab there. Okay, so now let's just look at this thing. So the first thing they have is the quick access toolbar. So this is that. We have file and task and resource and blah 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 blah. The next is the ribbon. This is the big thing here. That's the ribbon. Then we have the timeline, and the timeline is basically kind of a shortened version of a Gantt chart. It basically shows all the things that are supposed to happen. Then we have the actual Gantt chart itself. This part, the Gantt chart part. Gantt chart part. That almost rhymes. And this is the default view for Microsoft Project. When you fire it up, this is what it starts with. And then it has, rows and columns. And you can, if you click on something, you can kind of sort of see what row and what column you're looking at, right? Because it kind of shades the row and column thing. This is just the same as Microsoft Excel. If you clicked on a cell, it'll kind of light up what row and what column it's on. Nothing fancy here. What's different slightly is I can see task mode, task name, duration, and start. And then this is a graphical view, which we don't have anything in. But there's an awful lot more fields here, which we can't see. Okay. So we move this little slider over to be able to see those extra fields. We're going to have to do that a little bit later on. And then at the very, very bottom is this little status bar, and it shows, some of the resource sheets and things, the Zoom, which we already talked, plus this thing that says tasks are manually scheduled. Cool. All right. So that's basically a whirlwind tour of the beginning user interface. The next thing is getting help. Now this is different. In the old one, there was actually a little question mark thing. Here it's a little different. There's several ways you can do it. You can always hit F1 on the keyboard, so I'm going to do that. And up pops the little help pane. Another way to do it, and this is something that you might want to use every time you know what it is you're trying to do, but you can't figure out where the heck it is, which happens to me a lot. Particularly when the book is different than the version that you've got, is to go right here where it says tell me more, okay, and then type in help, and it'll do whatever it is you told it to do. Okay, that's very handy because the book does not match the actual version that we're using, and so you might want to use that a lot. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, so you know what that means. I'll see you again in just a second.